Welcome and khosh amadid to our latest talk in the special series organized by the Iranian Studies Initiative at the University of California, Santa Barbara, in collaboration with Farhang Foundation. I am Alireza Ardakani, Executive Director of Farhang Foundation here in Los Angeles. We are a non-political, non-religious, not-for-profit organization with the sole mission to celebrate and promote Iranian art and culture for the benefit of the community at large. Today, we're honored to welcome our special guest speaker, Dr. Touraj Atabaki, who is joining us live from the Netherlands for Constitutionalists Sans Frontières, drama as a means of conveying the need for social and political changes to the common people, from Baku to Bukhara, en route to Tabriz and Tehran. This series is co-organized by the Graduate Center for Literary Research at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and with the support of the Nariman Emrani Foundation and the Duncan and Susan Mellencamp Fund. Now, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Janet Afari, the Director of the Iranian Studies Initiative at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Thank you very much, Alireza, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Afari, Director of the Iranian Studies Initiative at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I'd like to welcome you to this fourth talk in our lecture series this year in collaboration with Farhang Foundation. Our focus this year has been on the artistic and literary exchanges between Iran, South Caucasus, Central Asia, and Russia in the 20th century. Our speaker today is Dr. Touraj Atabaki. He's a research fellow at the International Institute of Social History and emeritus professor and chair of social history of the Middle East and Central Asia at Leiden University. Dr. Atabaki has written extensively on the 19th and 20th centuries history of Iran, Turkey, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. He has published 20 books, many of which can be found on Amazon, and numerous articles and book chapters. His earlier research interest has been on ethnic studies and authoritarianism in Iran, the Ottoman Turkey, and everyday Stalinism in Soviet Central Asia and the Caucasus. More recently, he has focused on labor history. He's coordinating a social history project on a century of work and labor in the Iranian oil industry, a project that is funded by the Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research. His latest books are Social History of the Iranian Oil Industry, which will soon be coming out with Cambridge University Press, a co-authored work called Victims of Their Faith, The Lives and Fates of Iranian Political Activists and Migrant Workers in the Interwar Soviet Union, which is published by the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow in 2020, and a co-edited work entitled Working for Oil, published by Palgrave Macmillan in 2018. I hope you join us for the remainder of the lecture series, which will continue through May of 2022. Thank you.
Very good evening. My sincere thanks goes to my dear friend, Professor Afari, Farhang Foundation, for inviting me to this lecture. And let me to share my screen. In the historiography of Iranian constitutionalism, constitutional revolution, the reformist movement is treated as a receptive movement crafted by the ideas originating chiefly from 19th century Western Europe and Ottoman Empire, with no dependencies on the Caucasus and Central Asia. In the case of Transcaspian connection, the historiography of Iranian constitutionalism has been usually limited to its reference to a few non-reciprocal links between Iran and the northern frontiers, where mainly the Caucasus was in charge of producing a revolutionary literature, periodical treaties, or dispatching revolutionary agents to the south in order to save the constitution from being slaughtered by the Qajar despotism. In my talk, in my other work, I have displayed the Transcaspian and Central Asia connection in details. In this talk, following a short introduction on the position of written literature for spreading the reformist movement of the early 19th century in the Caucasus and Central Asia and Iran, I then focus on a new genre which was introduced and practiced, drama. For you who are interested to see my other works on the Indian connection, the Kabul connection, Orenburg and Ottoman, in the question and answer, I can give you the references. The early contact between reformist individuals in the margin of the Russian Empire, the Caucasus and Central Asia with their fellow thinker in Iran dates back to the last decades of the 19th century. According to a report by a British agents in the region, in the late 19th century, the newspaper Akhtar was widely circulated in Central Asia and enjoyed an enthusiastic readership. Akhtar was one of the early prominent reformist Persian periodicals that had been issued outside Iran. Edited by the Muhammad Tahir Tabrizi, the first issue of Akhtar was published in 1875 in Istanbul, and its publication lasted until 1894. The radical reformist partiality of Akhtar soon made it one of the most influential voices for promoting social justice in the region where Persian was spoken most. Another influential Persian periodical distributed in Central Asia was Qanun. According to an account published in the Russian periodical Turkistansky Vedomosti of 1898, Qanun had been broadly circulating in Turkestan, in Tashkent, in Samarkand, and in Bukhara, causing some anxiety for the Russian authorities. Edited by the dissident Iranian statesman Mirza Malkum Khan Nazim-ud-Dawla, the first issue of Qanun was published in 1890 in London, and within 15 years of its existence became one of the most anti-establishment reformist popular periodical in Persian language. Among the various subjects Malcolm Khan treated in Qanun were topics such as the protest against condition of lawlessness, the need for the Grand National Assembly, and for the individual right and individual liberty. Qanun's call for change and reform soon found its way in Central Asia. One of the varied routes for publication like Qanun to reach Central Asia was, and Bukhara was including the route from Baku and Krasnovodsk to Bukhara. Another alternative, if I go back, in addition to the route from the Baku and then Krasnovodsk and then Bukhara, another route which is somehow neglected, and in one of my studies, I have studied that route, was from Calcutta. So the Qanun or other periodicals reached Central Asia, published in London, going to Calcutta, and from Calcutta, passing Delhi, Lahore, and Kabul, and then reaching Bukhara and Samarkand through Charju and Ashgabat. This was another route that I studied in my work. And, it was most welcome, these periodical like Qanun or Akhtar or others in Kabul. And if you study the constitutional movement in Kabul, you see very, very references to the Persian periodicals published either in Iran or outside Iran, in Istanbul or in Cairo, through Calcutta or through Baku, finding the way to Tashkent and Samarkand and Bukhara. Since the 16th century, Persians have resided in India, founding one of the Indian prosperous and learned communities. So they supported this transmission and transformation. The publication of the periodicals Hablul Matin, for example, in Calcutta, very undoubtedly was one of the most conspicuous icon of the activities of this community. Hablul Matin, published in India. By the end of the 19th century, journalism as a new genre gradually founded its status in Persian literature. In Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, a wide range of periodicals were published that soon crossed the border, reaching neighboring countries. Akinji, Farmer, Mullah Nasruddin soon became two of the most popular periodicals. While Akinji regularly commented on political development in Iran and Turkestan, Mullah Nasruddin often portrayed through its critical caricatures the social and political life in Iran and Turkestan. For example, in 1909, when Astangul Beg, on the request of the Kushbek in Bukhara, closed down the Tatar modern school, Mullah Nasruddin filled its pages with the caricatures of all known reactionary circles of the region, and above all, the Bukharian mullahs. Mullah Nasruddin stands on the Iranian constitutional movement. Mullah Nasruddin's stance on Iranian constitutional movement and revolution has been covered comprehensively by Professor Afari in her study, and I don't need to go through that. These periodicals were much concerned not to jeopardize their already vulnerable relation with the Russian authorities in the Caucasus and Central Asia. In Central Asia, the local political magnates and clerics had more influential position. For example, in Bukhara, the newspaper Bukhara Sharif, after distributing 153 issues at the instigation of the Russian political agents in Bukhara, was forced to stop its publication in January 1913. Securing the necessary permission to publish written was not the constitutionalist only concern. In a region where the literacy rate was so low, the circulation of the information among people could be facilitated through intermediary channels, such as private gathering or coffee houses. A reader read newspapers while the public listened, and a debate usually followed. Such practices of addressing the analphabetic public paved the way for using other literary genres, such as dialogue, short stories, or modern drama, for political objectives. Modern drama was introduced to the region in the early 20th century. Judged by today's standards, no trace of the professional theater or drama can be found in Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia in 19th century, although there existed a long tradition of performance by religious practice like taziyeh, folk singers, dancers, storytellers, folk humorists known as maskarabazi in Tajik, and popular marionette player zuchabazi or lukhtakbazi, all in Tajik. Mirza Fatih Ali Akhundzadeh, 1812-1878, the Azerbaijani enlightened reformist, novelist, and dramatist, was the pioneer of drama performance in the East. While living in Tbilisi, he became acquainted with Russian literature and adapted some Russian dramas into Azerbaijani and Persian. However, it was his early compiled drama known as Tamsilat, or the Six Comedies, that earned him recognition not only in Iran, but also in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Written between 1850 and 1855, the techniques and structure of Akhundzadeh's comedies are, of course, derived from European models. He is known to have been acquainted with the plays of Alexander Gribaidov and Nikolai Gogol, as well as those of Shakespeare and Molière. But he carefully applied Western methods to the creation of character drawn from local communities. He may be regarded as the first and the most successful playwright of the Islamic world in the 19th century. In a number of letters to his close friend, Akhundzadeh made it clear that his purpose as a playwright was social and didactic. Through exposing corrupt, ignorant, and superstitious figure to ridicule or to on the stage, he hoped that his audience would draw the obvious conclusion and gradually acquire what he regarded as progressive and enlightened outlook. Shortly, other Azerbaijani dramatists followed Akhundzadeh's footsteps. Among them, Najaf Vazirov, Abdurrahim Haqverdiev, Narimanov, Jalil Muhammad Qolizadeh, and Jafar Saraj Jabarli. Although Akhundzadeh Yusuf Shah Sarraj was good enough to be adapted for performance, it was originally a narrative. Indeed, it was these dramatists who hoped that historical drama gradually will find its way to address the mass audience. For them, history was to be learned in order to avoid blunders. For example, Haqverdiev wrote Agha Muhammad Shah Qajar and played it. Narimanov, Nadir Shah Afshar, and Jabbali composed Nasiruddin Shah. All historical dramas were based on the life of three Iranian kings. These were considered among the most well-known dramas in the Turco-Persian literary history. Written in 1899, the drama Nadir Shah Afshar was performed in all major cities of Central Asia and soon became Narimanov's best received work. Nariman of Our Efforts to take the audience back to the Isfahan of 1717 portrayed the incompetent Sultan Hussein Safavi, the last king of the Safavid dynasty, and inspired by romantic nationalism, Narimanov blames the corrupt of the late Safavid king for the calamities experienced by the Iranians. Yet he shows no hesitation to pay homage to Nadir, who, according to Narimanov, resisted Ottoman pressure and successfully endeavored to put all pieces of Iranian territorial jigsaw puzzle together. Nevertheless, Narimanov's story of Nadir Shah Afshar does not end with the king's triumphant accomplishment. By making an effort to portray the entire realm of Nadir, Narimanov demonstrates what is known as the cycle of centralization and decentralization of political power in the East. In a society with high social mobility, assuming power and hence restoring order was a viable option for semi-bandit Nadir. Nevertheless, it didn't take long for Nadir to act as an arbitrary ruler establishing an absolute state, which eventually led to his own downfall. Here, the cyclic historical process of centralization and decentralization is embodied in the drama of Nadir Shah Afshar. It was in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution of 1905 that such pieces were performed in Baku, Tbilisi, Tabriz, Qazvin, Rasht, or Tehran. The move towards the other side of the Caspian Sea started in 1909, when the first modern play by the Azerbaijani Haqverdiev was performed in Fereydun High School in Ashgabat. The title of or the content of this play remain unknown, but because in a Russian archive they don't say anything about the name of this play, but they say the play of Haqverdiev was staged in Fereydun High School. But when the same play was performed in Marv, it faced an angry reaction of the city's clerics. We know about that. There was a protest by mullahs. Following its performance in Ashgabat, the Azerbaijani company moved to other cities in Central Asia. Now they have done Iran, now they do it in Central Asia, including Samarkand, Khoghand, Charju. Headed by Ahmad Kamralinsky and with the renowned actor of Ruhollah Sadiqi, Narimanov, Hussein Arablinsky, all these famous actors of the time, the company performed Narimanov, Nadir Shah Afshar, and Nadir Shah Faji'asi, that is the tragedy of Nadir Shah, and other play by Vazirov, Yaghishtan Chikhtikh Yaghmaha Dushtukh, coming from the rain, falling in the store, into the store. And here, Haqverdiev covers the life and time of Agha Muhammad Shah Qajar. Later on, we have Darwish and Monsieur Jourdain and Darwish Darwish Mastali Shah, and Haj Qaraya played him in Sargozasht Mard Khasis, and all these by Mirza Akhundzadeh. All these drama were received by very, very enthusiastic public, except the mullahs in Central Asia. However, it was Ali Akbar Askarov who formed the first Azerbaijani sitting style. Up to now was a standing performance. Askarov soon launched his own school and began training local Central Asia players in 1913. He also recruited a small number of Azerbaijani performers to stage his play in both Azerbaijani, Persian, and Uzbeki. He performed Behbudi's Pedarkush, that is patricide, in Samarkand, Tashkent, and Qatta-Qurban. In 1915, the journal Ayene, which was published in Samarkand, expressed its gratitude to Azerbaijanis for their initiative in popularizing the modern drama in Central Asia, the language that Persian or Uzbeki understood by the people of Samarkand and Bukhara. According to Ayene, today Askarov has performed in almost every part of Turkestan. The journal also hoped that soon Turkestani native artists will follow Askarov's footsteps and help spread modern culture in Turkestan. In a traditional society where women enjoyed no significant social life, male actors played women's role in drama. In a Shiite ta'ziyeh or passion play, where actors read instead of memorize their lines, young men were always selected to replace women in the role of Ayeshe or Zainab. However, with the advent of modern drama, actresses gained recognition and took active part in performances. In Abdullah Qaderi's Bakhtsiz Kuyuf, that is unfortunate bridegroom, an anonymous Zahra Khanum for the first time came to the stage. In 1915, where the same actor performed Haji Bekov's Layli and Majnun, an actress called FMA played the role of Layli. So this is the first time that women are coming on stage. A year later, it was Khanum M. They don't mention their name in a leaflet or pamphlet published. It says, the Khanum M appeared at the Kalazi Theater of Tashkent in a role of Layli. But gradually, they find their way, and for the first time after Central Asia, when they performed in Iran, in Qazvin, and in Rasht and the Tehran, we had for the first time women playing their own role. The outbreak of the World War first did not let the Azerbaijani theater to stop its performance in Central Asia and in Iran. The early dramatic performance with their rehearsed critique of the socio-political situation in the Tsarist Empire was played in Iran were gradually found their way to criticizing what's happening in the southern neighbor in Iran. But here you see that, I mean, the type of performance is gradually changing. If before was more and more political, more and more covering social issues, now gradually by the beginning of the war, maybe because of the very severe condition, maybe because of the hard censorship imposed by the Russian authorities, we see gradually a shift in this genre, and entertaining music play is coming and finding their way in the stage. The highly lyrical and humored play of Hajibekov were amongst the most popular performance in the region. Ruhollah Sadiqi, who had returned to Central Asia and formed his own theater company, was the main performer of Hajibekov's lyric and comedy masterpieces like Leili o Majnoon or Asli Karam, Arshin Malalan, Mashhadi Ibad. Although Hajibekov's musical performances were characterized by a critical approach to social issues, the political message was not communicated as explicitly as in his earlier performance. However, Hajibekov's comical performance, blended with the folk songs and street melodies, remained appealing to many. In the early months of the First World War, Hajibekov also produced and directed dramas with more simultaneous political components. According to the journal Ayine, in 1914, he performed in the Muslim Theater Hall of Samarkand, Talishinsky Eski Türkiye, the olden Turkey, or what is called the Turkistan Köhne Türkiye Faciesi, tragedy of olden Turkey. And Rizayev produced Jihalet, ignorance, and in some other historical drama, such as Nadir Shah. So that means it was not the historical drama totally forgotten, totally out of stage, but gradually their performance was diminished in favor of the lyric and in favor of the more musical performance. In addition to Bukhara, Samarkand, Tashkent, Farhang valleys, we have other cities that, as I mentioned, Qazvin, Rasht, Tehran, Tabriz. There were other, these performers, these theater groups moved, and they showed their interesting dramas. Some of them, directly linking with the everyday life of the Iranian community. For example, I can see that there was two of them which directly connecting with the Iranian community living in the Caucasus was Jihalet and Hamshehri Menzili, the house of the compatriot, or Hamshehri, because the Iranian community in the Caucasus were always referred to Hamshehri. They didn't say, they don't call it Iranian, but they are Hamshehri. That's migrant workers coming from Iran and finding their way, living in Central Asia. So here we have, on the eve of the war, First World War, the Transcaspian traditional dependency, which were inspired by the idea of constitutionalism refashioned political activism in Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. New culture and political organization were founded that promoted a strong call for change throughout the region. In Samarkand, the Iranian and Tatars formed the Musulman Musiqi va Drama Jamiyati, Muslim Music and Drama Society. And in Tashkent, the Karl Marx Drama Destesi, that is Karl Marx Drama Group, were set up. Gradually, you see that, from constitutionalism, we're coming to the communism. Following the formation of these organizations, Khantalensky performed Hurriyet Qurbanları, the freedom martyrs, in Samarkand and Tashkent to help raise funds for the Ishtirakiyun party. So they have the fundraising for the Ishtirakiyun, or the Communist Party. While some veteran constitutionalists had been affiliated with Panturanism, others joined the rank of the Bolshevik Party. Subsequently, the emergence of a new socio-political order in Transcaspian region severely undermined the old call for individualism, public presentation, political participation, territorial nationalism, promoting mostly now Bolshevism, socialism, communism. And this led to a sudden change in the linguistic, ethnic, and nationalistic pattern upon which the region had stood. And here we saw gradually that what is founded by the end of the 19th century, calling for the constitutionalism without border, moving from one region to another, replaced mostly by revolutionary Marxism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atabaki, for that wonderful talk, showing how globetrotting these writers and artists and performers and playwrights were at a time when communication was so limited, really. It's quite impressive, actually. So we have a number of questions. One set of questions is about the role of women. They want to know what caused women to start playing in female roles. How revolutionary was it at the time? Was there much resistance? And also if there were any notable female writers who were part of this era.
Let me just start from the last question. I don't know anything about the female writer at this. I didn't come across any female writer at that point. But you know what was happening by, let's say, following the Russian Revolution of 1905, you see gradually that there is a change in Caucasus. And you have this constitutionalism in Russia itself. The Tsar promised to be a constitutional monarch, and they have parliament, and there are people living in Caucasus and Central Asia based on the new constitution of the Tsarist Empire. They've got the right to be elected and to elect. And you see that in major cities, you have more schools for female schools for girls. And then this is happening, I should say, 1906, 1907. Almost the same period, you see that clandestine societies are formed in Iran. In Shiraz, for example, we know for sure in Tehran and in Rasht that the women's societies. And then we have got also women literature for equal rights. And don't forget, I mean, that was in a second majlis, Iranian majlis, when Vakil Roaya the deputy of Hamadan for the first time commented on the constitutional revolution code and said that, I mean, the women should have the same right as the men. And which, of course, I mean, Modarres opposed Vakir Aya's stance. And the same Modarres that you have got a highway now in Iran, in Tehran, there is a highway called Highway Modarres, Buzurrah Modarres. Anyhow, all these things that happening gave a special position to the women activists to be more in public. And for the first time, you see that now in drama, you have women performers. Something here should be mentioned because most people, they think, I mean, the first women performer were Armenian or Tatar. That's true. But we have also Muslim performer, because in a Russian archive, when they cover the activities of these groups, how they performed in different cities, when they mention all the names of the players, and then it comes to the mention the name of the women players, is all Muslim names, is not Armenian names. There are Armenians, but not all.
Thank you very much. So one of the questions is about who was the audience for these plays and in what actual locations were these, not just what cities, but where they actually performed, like what was the setting where they were actually performed?
These are mostly the city, people for the city, the urban population, were not rural population, the urban population, and mostly played in the beginning was mostly played in the schools, and they didn't have a theater, they didn't have any public assembly room or something like this. They played in, and sometimes, I mean, in the street, in a corner of street, that was standing play was that. I mean, they had a permission, usually in a public park, the open theater, they played it. But gradually they found that their own, I mean, location to perform.
Thank you. The plays of Akhundzadeh have been translated into English by Hassan Javadi and also in Persian, as you showed, Jafar Kharjadaghi. Well, what about the plays of Narimanov and Haqverdiyev? Has there been any attempt to translate these into Persian and English?
No, to the best of my knowledge, no, unfortunately not. I know that the text exists, but was not, the manuscript exists. Mm-hmm. For example, Agha Muhammad Shah Qajar or Nadir Shah Afshar, or all the texts exist in Persian and in Azerbaijani and in Russian and in Uzbek. Why Russian? Because they never performed in Russian. The reason was Russian translation, because the local Russian authorities in the Caucasus and Russia, there was a special department to go through all the publication in the region. So they needed them in the Russian translation of these things. And so we have the Russian translation, Persian, Azerbaijani, Uzbek, but I haven't seen a published form of these plays.
Wow, well, that's definitely something that needs to be done, right, in the future. Can you talk a little bit more about the influence of Russian writers and Russian writers on these Azerbaijani writers?
As I mentioned, the Akhundzadeh was very familiar with the Russian performance. So in 19th century, we had a community of the Russian community in Baku, in Tbilisi, and in Tashkent. In all these three, not in Ashgabat, was not a very strong community, Russian community in Ashgabat, but was in Tashkent, because Tashkent was a center of the administration, and in Baku and in Tbilisi. Yerevan was not there yet. And in these three cities, we had a theater hall. And so the Russian community, Russian theater group coming from St. Petersburg used to play here. And so the Azerbaijanis, the Uzbekis, the Turkmen, and the Iranian living there, I mean, became acquainted with the Russian performances in these theater in these theaters. Yes.
Okay, so let's see. There are people who are writing and thanking you for your work and sharing your rich knowledge with us. Can you talk a little bit more about censorship? You briefly referred to it. You said that the works had to be published in or translated into Russian so that the authorities could see it. But do we know anything more about how the censorship worked?
Yeah. In fact, I published years ago that I published one of the samples of the censorship in a journal called Iran Shenasi, Dr. Matin. Was it Iran Shenasi or Iran Name? I think it was
Iran Shenasi.
Iran Shenasi. I gave one example. There wasn't the dialogue Monazere. Dialogue was published in Baku, and then I found the original dialogue, the Monazere, and then I saw also a page with a stamp that was this Monazere, this dialogue was banned by the local authorities, Department of the Good Behavior of the People, something like this. They stopped the publication of this. Guidance, something like that. If I translate from the Russian, it's called the Department for the Observing good behavior of the people, something like this. So they banned the publication of. So this is an example. I published it in Iran Shenasi. Then you find it. I mean, many examples that the Russians they're not happy. In Baku or in Tbilisi, directly they banned. In Tashkent, yes, directly. Samarkand, they did it. But in Bukhara, because the Emirate of Bukhara, we had still, so they approached the Emir of Bukhara if they wanted them to stop the publication of some journal or some treatise or some drama. They also always approached the Emir of Bukhara. As I mentioned, in a case of the periodical, the newspaper Bukhara Sharif, they were not happy with the Bukhara Sharif, so they approached Amir of Bukhara to stop publication.
Nice. So there is some difference between the early 20s, right after the Russian Revolution, a few years, and then the late 20s and the 30s. So for example, Jalil Mehmet Qolizadeh was performing his play all over, right? In Baku, he went to Tashkent, and particularly his play, The Dead. And he got huge audiences, but would you say that the change happened after 1927-28, when Stalin actually became far more powerful in the region?
That is definitely a critical point, date, 27 and after. But everything, this is my reading, everything started 10 years earlier. 1917, when we had a Russian Revolution. Before Russian Revolution, up to 1916, you could see that there is the idea of constitutionalism, debate on individual rights, having rights for equal rights for women, and issues like this was commonly discussed. And they followed closely what's happening in Ottoman Turkey, Constitutional Revolution of 1908, Ottoman Turkey, what's happening in Iran. But gradually by 1917, 1918, when we have the Russian Revolution, the atmosphere is changing and then there is a new parties coming, and the Bolsheviks are moving to the south. Every day we have this demonstration by the Bolsheviks in Baku, in Tbilisi, in Tashkent, in Ashgabat. Iranian communities are very much divided between the left and right. So there is a change, and some of the constitutionalists were not enough revolutionaries for the Bolsheviks. So they were somehow marginalized. And those who were in one way or another contributed to the Bolsheviks' agenda had a more a place to more position to stand in a public sphere.
But also this history is really almost gradually forgotten. I mean, so much of the credit is given to the Bolshevik Revolution and changes that the Soviets brought about, and all this work that the local people had done, the Azerbaijani people had done, the Georgians had done, the Armenians for that matter, or elsewhere. This seems to me that's all forgotten. It's only much, much later that it comes out, right?
Yes, and not only that, let me just say, because I just mentioned all those people who were in this the drama, in these theater groups, I mean, performing, among them some Iranians, because, for example, when we have the performance in Tehran or Qazvin and Rasht, the director found it a very interesting figure and said, let's come with me. We go to Baku to perform there. Why not joining us? And you see that in the middle of Ashgabat, a player from Qazvin is there. In the middle of Samarkand, a Rashdi, a Gilani is there. You know, it was just, I mean, nobody cares about frontiers at that time. I mean, people are joining each other and performing. And yeah, that was the case. But the sad things about this page of the constitutionalism in the Caucasus, Central Asia, and its dependencies, links with Iran, with the South, was that, I mean, the most of these individuals, I mentioned the name, they were purged in 1930s, you know, one by one. Yeah. You know, if you go through the list of the victims of the Stalinist purge, you see these people's name.
Right. Right.
They were purged. So this page should be forgotten. Right. Selected amnesia of the Stalinism.
Right, right. Okay, let me end by a comment by Homi Gandhi. This is a fantastic historical presentation of how art and culture influenced the silent revolution of early 20th century, influencing the historical changes. Thank you, Professor Touraj Atabaki, UC Santa Barbara, and Farhang Foundation, and Homi Gandhi representing Fezana. Thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time. I know you're very much in demand these days because of the Ukraine issue, of course, and we really, truly appreciate your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Atabaki. We're so grateful for you joining us today and for this fantastic presentation. And thank you again to Dr. Afari and her entire team at UC Santa Barbara for helping us organize this entire talk series. I would like to also announce that we will be holding our next talk this coming Saturday, March 5th, with Dr. Teoman Aktan for the role of critical literature in reflecting the social, political issues of the Qajar and the Caucasus. So please do register now at farhang.org and be sure to join us again next Saturday. Thank you to you, our dedicated audience who have joined us from all over the world today. We are so grateful for your participation and we look forward to welcoming you again next time. Until then, we bid you farewell and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.